Hello, people of Storyville. How you doing? You're welcome to another episode of the Storyville podcast, where we've been reading the book Two Truths and a Lie, and today we'll be reading chapter 5. And this story is getting more intense. I'm enjoying every bit of it, and I'm sure you are. So, just before we proceed, if you're new to this channel, kindly subscribe and hit the notification button by your right. All right, guys. So let's quickly dive into chapter 5. Who's ready? Ta-da! Joe wondered how it was possible that his mother would be standing next to this strange girl in a picture that was supposed to have been taken like 20 years ago. Are you seeing this, Tim? Joe asked as he turned around to show his brother the picture. Tim was quick to respond. He grabbed the picture from Joe's grip and dashed the girl. "Where is my sister, you little witch?" he yelled, shaking the girl by her shoulder. "Speak! I know you can understand me," he continued. "You need to take it easy, Tim. I know I don't think she responds well enough to violence," Joe said to his brother. Meanwhile, Ryan still lay lifeless 5 feet away from the boys. "Who are you?" Joe asked. "I need some answers. Nothing seems to be making any sense." "My name is McCauley, and I am your mother." What did Joe just hear? Was this some kind of joke? How could a 12-year-old girl claim to be his mother? He looked at Tim, who was now laughing uncontrollably. He didn't blame Tim for laughing. It was actually very hilarious. And if he wasn't so curious, he would have been laughing too. But there was something about her voice now when she spoke this time around. It was different from the one who responded to them in Polish a while ago. This one sounded more mature and stable. It was almost like a totally different person. Besides, the name she called McCauley sounded like something he had heard significantly before, but at this point, he just couldn't place his mind on it. Maybe this was not a joke after all. "What's this all about? How can you be my mother?" "I know you're confused, Joseph, and there is nothing I can say to you that will make any sense, but I could show you. I can show you who you are, Joe. And the sooner you realize who you are, the closer we'll be to stopping the prophet and getting Emily back." "How can you possibly show me?" "Take my hand, the both of you," McCauley said, holding out her hands each and beckoning Tim and Joe to take one. Joe's gaze met with Tim's, and they both then shifted their gaze to their uncle, who was still lying lifeless. "I'm sorry about your uncle," McCauley said. "That wasn't me who hurt him, and I feel he should have known better than try to stop me during a raid." Those words put Tim in frenzy. He moved to McCauley and attempted to choke the life out of her, but Joe got in the way. McCauley smiled. "Strength and wisdom. One without the other is useless," she said in a very calm tone. "That's why neither of you can do this on your own." Her words seemed to send a wave of calmness across the room, and as both the boys looked at her in bewilderment. Just then, there was another loud thunderstorm that made the lights begin to go off and on again. "She's coming! Both of you, take my hands, now! There is no time!" Joe and Tim grabbed each of McCauley's hands, and the weirdest thing happened. The trio vanished into thin air. It happened so fast. Joe could have sworn that it was less than a second ago he was in a living room and he had grabbed McCauley's hands, but he wasn't in his living room anymore. The scenery was so peaceful. It was no longer night and the sun was burning ever so brightly in the sky. Yes, he could see the bright afternoon sky. They were at what seemed to be a lake. Joe could recognize that it was a lake where Mom and McCauley had taken the picture. McCauley was standing in front of the lake with her backs turned to Tim and Joe. What had just happened was definitely strange and would cause any child to freak out, but definitely not Tim and Joe. They had seen enough strange things that night to expect anything less. "Where are we?" Tim asked. "This is where it all began," McCauley replied, still not turning to look at the boys, but her eyes fixed at the lake like she was expecting something to happen. "Are you a fan of myths, Joe?" "Why do I feel like you already know the answer to that question?" Joe fired back. McCauley had a smirk on her face on hearing Joe's response. "Well, Be that as it may, are you familiar with the Slavian mythology? Just as Joe was about to respond to her, there was a huge wave that blew in the lake. The center of the waters began to rise up high like someone huge was emerging. Joe and Tim flinched and held each other's arms, trying to be as brave as they could be. I can imagine. While little McCosh remained unmoved, and her eyes still fixed on the water and what was emerging from it. It was a creature that stood at just slightly above 5 feet tall, but very robust. It was in the form of a half-naked man with a frog-like face, greenish/grassy beard, and foggy hair. His body was covered in fish scales. On one of his arms, he had paws, and the other hands, he had normal human fingers, which held a trident. In all of this, his most frightening feature was strangely his glowing red eyes. Joe could not believe what he was actually seeing with his eyes. He had read about the Vodianoi severally, and he was obsessed with so many mythologies, and the Slavian mythology was one of his favorites. This particular creature, as scary as it seemed, was commonly called the Grandfather.
"It's really good to see you again, Joseph Carson,"
the grandfather said in a very deep and husky voice. Wow, it's getting more intense. Okay, that's the end of chapter 5. I mean, who was scared? The story is getting more creepy. So what do you guys think? What do you have to say about this chapter? What do you have to say about this chapter? All right, guys. See you in chapter 6.